agreed to increase the minimum manning from 20 to 22 and said he would pay for it using overtime. May 14, 2008, morning call, the mayor. And now who is willing to compromise public safety? And who is willing, on top of a tax increase, to risk causing the increase of homeowner and renter insurance premiums within that primary response area on top of that tax increase? The mayor. Fire protection and public safety in general are like a life insurance policy. You hope and trust that as the breadwinner, your family never has to collect those benefits due to your untimely demise. But you pay the premiums just in case, and the public pays their taxes for this kind of public safety protection just in case. It's a core function of local government, much more core than skate plazas, greenways, ice rinks, and steel stacks. Yet for those extravagances, there's always money. An area volunteer fire chief said at a recent meeting of the Northampton County Gaming Revenue Authority, the old standard wisdom was that a fire doubles in size each minute it is not being suppressed. And he noted that due to the increase in the use of plastics and synthetic fibers, recent studies have shown now that fires quadruple in size for each unsuppressed minute. I think one of the firefighters touched on that. Regarding the EMS, I also don't believe a word of what Gordon Smith has been espousing the last couple of months, and neither should you. Gordon reported to me when I was with the city, and he served on the EMS task force with me and Council President Donchez. I know him unlike most of you. What you should be asking yourselves is how an EMS official could fervently support and work his tail off for a modern EMS center for 10 years, and then suddenly reverse his position 180 degrees. I can only wonder what threats have been made. And for anyone on council who thinks that having an EMS station on Dewberry Avenue closer to your home is a good thing, you need to do your homework, and Gordon actually touched on this earlier. The majority of EMS calls are made when the units are already out on the road. And since there's only going to be one ambulance out there, that ambulance, which may be the closest one, just might be finishing up at St. Luke's Hospital at the ER in Fountain Hill. The fire truck that responds will in most likelihood be coming from the district fire station on Dewberry Avenue. That choice is a no-brainer. From the one-way pair wasted effort to the South Main Street parking fiasco to the city's financial duress, why in God's name do any of you believe anything coming from this administration? Your allegiance should be with the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shire.
Bill Shire, 1998 Eaton Avenue. A couple of thoughts. I'm puzzled that a fire station that's been open for 46 years is no longer needed, even though population has been moving in that direction. I know that city government isn't perfect, but the idea that it could have been spending money on a fire station for 46 years that wasn't really needed just strikes me as not within the realm of possibility. We've been presented tonight with what the logicians call a false dichotomy. That is, there's only two choices. But as been pointed out, there's at least three. I like the description of the bipolar, if you will, EMS service. But it doesn't have to be at Dewberry. It could be right on Alex Middle Road, as been pointed out. Smaller than the money that was taxed to provide, but would still provide the service that Gordon described. One thing lurking here is dollars. And the administration brought up the question of overtime. And it certainly has been increasing. And I can remember finance committee meetings 7 years ago. Overtime was going up. Budget transfers and about this time of the year for overtime, even earlier. and every year it seems to be greater. I find it difficult to understand why overtime has been going up like this. And I'm sure everybody in this room has heard allegations that there's a small group, very small group of firefighters that abuse the sick leave. This is something the controller should be looking into. And it's doable. I mean, the records are there. It would take time, but those fighters who abuse the system could be identified and dealt with. The rest of the fire department and the safety of the city should not have to pay the penalty. If overtime is a problem, and it certainly is, and we heard tonight that there's going to be one overtime employee every shift, something's wrong. And even if you do eliminate the abuses, perhaps there's another way of dealing with overtime. Now, we've heard that there's part-timers in the EMS system. In the school district, we have something called substitute teachers. How about substitute firefighters? Some additional hires. In today's economy, I'm sure you could find capable people who could be adequately trained. They would be the ones, they would be part-time, maybe full-time, but they would be the ones to fill the needed positions due to sick leave or whatever at a reduced cost to the city. So a couple of thoughts there. Let's start thinking a little bit outside the box, and in particular, let's talk about 3 options on EMS, not 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shira. Anybody on the left side? I can't see around the boards here, I'm sorry. So. Okay, move to the center section. Anyone that did not sign up? Sir.
Good evening. Good evening. Definitely appreciate the opportunity.
Sir, can you say your name and your address, please?
Sorry. William Henry. My address is 2100 Main Street.
Thank you.
I do a lot of statistical work, graduate, PhD candidate. So I evaluate a lot of numbers. I have a good grasp on the stuff. I prefer it to some of the other mental health things that I take care of. There's a convergence issue with the data that was presented by Mayor Callahan and some of the other data. In particular, didn't make any sense. It also headed in a direction that was really not related to the things associated with the firehouse. So, although it talked about the firehouse, it didn't particularly deal with the real issues there, as far as I could understand. I'm a taxpayer, and I'm a thinker, and there's a lot of things in Bethlehem that Mayor Callahan has done that I really am happy with. I love living in Bethlehem, been here for about 10 years. Looking forward to staying here. But this particular thing with the firehouse being moved, I can't live with that. It was my house that caught on fire a couple days ago on the corner of Dewberry and Main. As I raced home, closed my practice, I'm a psychologist, and got home. I can't say enough about fire. Firemen, absolutely stellar, wonderful. Kept my brains in order because I was kind of coming unglued. That being said, I cannot in any way understand why my house would be in such a far reach if you got rid of that firehouse from the other ones. My home could have been quite literally destroyed, if not completely destroyed. It could have been much worse for my sons, my wife, myself. We could be out, for a year as a rebuilding process. So again, The convergence of the statistical data does not equate to sound statistical reason. In fact, it seemed to be missing reason altogether at some points. I was happy to hear some of the other data coming out because it helped me to understand more of the general flow of the data. Definitely would love to see the EMS on Illick's Mill. Would love to see that happen. But if the firehouse was removed, based on the fact that I just had a fire and they did a lot to save the house, if that was removed, there's no convergence of reason. If that makes any sense whatsoever. Once again, happy to be a Bethlehem resident, happy to pay my taxes. Love the city, love the services. Appreciate the time.
Mr. Henry, thank you for coming, and to your family again for coming. Anybody else in the center section? On the section to the right, over here, anyone? I'm sorry, please, thank you.
Nancy Swartz, and I live at 2133 Dogwood Lane in the city of Bethlehem. And I just want to say, keep the Dewberry station open. If there's a fire that Engine 9 over at Dewberry is covering for, and my house starts on fire, that tells me the response time for my house is going to be longer. And I'm going to sustain more damage to my house than I would if the Dewberry station were open and able to cover that area. Your taxes were raised, the money is there, build a new EMS station on Illick's Mill. I agree it doesn't have to be as big as it was initially proposed. Start with a smaller satellite one. Use the money for that. Don't close the Dewberry station. And as far as the money, Mayor, that the firemen are getting, they deserve every cent of it that they are getting. I don't care how much it is. I'd rather pay taxes for that to make sure that there is coverage for my property when my property starts on fire. I thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else?
My name is Joe Mary. I live at 2324 East Boulevard. I've been a firefighter for the city for starting my 22nd year. I work at Company 5 Easton Avenue, and they're talking about moving extra people to my station, Company 5. That station was built, let's say, approximately 1950. It has the original kitchen from 1950, all the facilities, the bathroom, all that's 1950. The floor is 1950. It has new windows they put in recently. The furnace that's in the place, I think, is about 1950. It's not, it's a well-constructed building. There is not a lot of room for two people, sufficient room. You add a third person, it's going to be a little tight. Just a couple thoughts in that respect, and also I like having Engine 7, Dewberry Avenue open, back up, because I know they're close by. When we pull up to a call that's in my neighborhood, I know they're coming and they're going to be there pretty quick. For them to have backup coming from Catasauqua Road or Broad Street, depending on where the call is, we could be waiting a while, which will, I'm the pump operator, but my hosman that's going into the fire, I know times it seems like forever, and it's only a couple minutes for assistant to get there from another station. But for his safety, for my safety, I would like to say keep Dewberry Fire Station open.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Public comment? Okay, and I would like to turn to my committee members. And Eric or Karen, would you like? Karen?
my years of being on council how different people can have different perspectives on the same subject. I have such a different, completely different feeling and opinion on this subject than it seems as if just about everyone in this room. Perhaps I live a block and a half, we have big blocks, but still, a block and a half from Dewberry Fire Station. And I work less than, I can't imagine how close where I work is to Dewberry Fire Station. I vote near Dewberry Fire Station. It's so close to my house. If there's an engine leaving Dewberry, I know it. Now, maybe my reaction is different because although I live so close to Dewberry, I didn't receive up front any of the mailers that were sent by the union. So I didn't have the issue framed for me as an issue of don't take away our fire station. It just wasn't framed for me that way. The way I heard about it was through friends who work here for the city, and it was framed as this plan that was devised by George Burkanic and Gordon here, and probably my first reaction was, you're going to have difficulty believing this, but I wish I'd thought of it. That was my first reaction. I view this issue as an affected homeowner, as a mother, as a wife, as the owner of a beloved dog and 2 cats, so differently than my own neighbors. I get emails every day from, and I know the names. I get emails from people I see walking on the train tracks I wave to. And my opinion on this was solid long before I learned anything about the money. I sat down and learned all this stuff that you're being exposed to now, whether you consider it irrelevant, smoke and mirrors, or whatever. It didn't even enter into my thinking. In fact, I asked the mayor to not, if you remember, I said, don't frame this as a money issue. This is a safety issue. And he is, I think, unfortunately, framing it as a money issue, but that resonates with a lot of people because although people say, go ahead and bring this great thing, they also then get very angry when their taxes are raised. So as a politician with more experience than I do, maybe framing it as a money issue is actually a smart idea. But I didn't know anything about the savings. I didn't know anything about the overtime issue. I didn't know anything about the increase in overall firefighter ranger wages. Those things still don't matter in terms of my support for this at all. They're important for me as a city councilman, which I can separate from the way I feel as a mother, as a wife, and as a homeowner, and as someone who works, at Illick's Mill, a lot of hours. The issue to me was about bringing an EMS facility closer to our neighborhood, to my home, to the seniors at Kirkland, and to where I work. And I know that someone who speaks and for whom many of us, including me, have a lot of respect, got up and said that if you think that that's going to make a difference, you need to have your head examined. Well, that's simply not the case. Because right now, if you think about it, the one EMS facility we have is as close to the south side as almost you could possibly get on the north side. And 70% of the people who use it want to go to St. Luke's. Well, remember the black marks? It's because they're closer to St. Luke's. That 30% who want to go to Muhlenberg, well, I'm one of them. I would much rather go to Muhlenberg if I have a need for an ambulance. And although I grew up in a time when you would hear fire trucks a lot, where there were fires that burnt down houses of my friends on a fairly regular basis, I can tell you that that's just not the way life in my neighborhood in Bethlehem is anymore. Houses just aren't constantly burning. You know, I used to be a teacher, I just retired. I can tell you that my students on the south side, they still live in a world where houses are regularly burning because they live densely, because they live in homes that are not inspected by the mother or the father, where they have landlords, where they don't own the homes, where there are great difficulties in fighting fires. My house, like probably a lot of my neighbors' houses, is surrounded by a pretty decent chunk of land. I live on an acre, like probably a lot of people who live in my neighborhood live on a half an acre or an acre. But where the firefighters are needed are where you see those dense circles. They're needed. Their reality isn't that once every 4 years a terrible thing happens, or I'm sorry, 4 times a year, and this year 5 times a year, a terrible thing happens. Their reality is their houses burn down and their 5 houses next to them burn down. If a terrible thing happened and my house caught on fire, my neighbors would not be affected. There's space between my house and my neighbors. So when I see, I'm going to be very blunt here, when I see "don't take down my firehouse," I feel that's not being very aware of your community. I think that's thinking of yourself, your house, your situation, and not particularly being aware of what it's like to live in very densely populated areas where there are lots of wires, so it's impossible to get a truck up to the 3rd floor or the 4th floor. I don't know about you, I don't have a 3rd floor or a 4th floor. At Illick's Mill I do. So I called and I said, if they move Dewberry, what's that going to do to my insurance? Nothing. I have a fire suppression system. That's why my insurance was lowered when we put that in. I have a sophisticated, expensive fire suppression system. I don't live in a poor neighborhood.
Wow.
I don't live in dense urban part of...
You can't all afford a fixed suppression system.
Yeah.
I don't,
Please.
excuse me, actually, yes, you're not supposed to be
Please.
talking back
We
to us.
were all respectful of everybody talking
Yes.
from here, so.
I don't have a fire suppression system in my home. I have the little things that you put on your ceiling and you change the batteries every year. And I have that thanks to firefighters. And this is not about, to me, the firefighters or the firefighters union versus the neighbors, our neighbors. I don't think that our job as, I don't think it's our job as your neighbors, I don't think it's our job as city council people, and I don't think it's our job as citizens and taxpayers to work with you on your upcoming contract, to assure anything about your job as a union member for 21 years. I didn't expect anyone to, if I wasn't happy about my contract, I didn't go around and flyer people and get them all alarmist because their children were all going to be uneducated. I don't expect to be positive with firefighters at the moment, but I'll be honest, I'm disappointed. Firefighters, teachers, other members of unions are supposed to be here for the city. They are well paid. We compensate them well. This isn't about that issue, and yet they are using your emotions so that you will support them on an issue that really doesn't have to be emotional. Think of it this way. Your firehouses are going to be 30 seconds perhaps, and that's actually very debatable. That's the worst case scenario. Farther from your house, that's your property. I understand, everyone loves and cherishes their property. But an EMS facility, and this is how I see this. This to me is totally good news. An EMS facility is going to be located in our neighborhood. An EMS facility that will not always be in the EMS facility. The ambulance won't always be available right there waiting for you, like the fire trucks are waiting for you. That should tell you something, that the fire trucks are waiting for you, that there aren't as many fires, that the EMS constantly busy. And I must share very quickly, and I'll close. 2 years ago, I almost lost my life. I didn't realize that 2 little ulcers in your stomach could actually kill you. And I lay at 4 o'clock in the morning on the floor of my bedroom. My husband called 911. First on the scene was a police officer. He was very nice. I barely remember it. The second on the scene was EMS. And they saved my life. It's true, my house wasn't on fire. The worst that happened was my rug was stained with blood. But I lived. I lived. And I lived because of EMS. And I think this has been framed incorrectly. What's more important? Who will you need more? What's more likely to happen to you as a neighbor in this area? Are you more likely to be physically harmed? Are your children more likely to be physically harmed by a fire? Or are they more likely, or are you more likely to need an ambulance sometime in your lifetime, in the next year, in the next 5 years? What are the chances? Look at the numbers without worrying about the plight of the firefighters. Look at the numbers. Your safety is what this committee is here to protect. Not the firefighters, not the budget. We're here to protect your safety. I'm impacted personally. Please take an opportunity, take a chance to look at this from a different perspective. I support this 100% on behalf of my children, my husband, and the people who live near me, the people in my neighborhood. And I hope that you can begin to see it a little bit differently if it's framed differently for you, if you give it a chance to be framed differently in your mind. Thank you.
Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also had the benefit of meeting with many of the individuals that we heard from tonight. I heard from the Fire Commissioner a couple times. I met with Commissioner Barkanek and the EMS Director, and as well as the Mayor, as well as Mr. Carp, who's still there, who's in charge of public property. And the difficult part of this is there are moving parts. We're talking about a couple different projects that kind of go together with the goal of doing what's best for the city, which is always a goal of City Council. This particular case, it's a very compelling case. There's a lot going on with it. There's a lot to consider. And that's what makes it not only a compelling case, but a very difficult case to evaluate. Some of the decisions belong to administration, as in all governments. Powers are separated. The council can't open or close it and decide to do it with EMS. We have some parts of it. Administration controls some parts of the decision. Together, you want to work with something, a plan that can work for the city and for all the residents inside the city. The case that was presented by the administration, I thought was well done, very informative. I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank all the people that came out to speak tonight as well. There are other facts that came out, and I'm sure that the administration is aware of some of the information, other information they may have taken in, and will continue to consider as this case, which is not decided tonight, either as far as the EMS side or the firehouse, is going to come to a conclusion tonight. It's still kind of a moving case that can be evaluated. I think the data, as far as calls, response time, definitely needs to be given serious consideration, and we know there's serious financial strain. And I kind of disagree with you, Ms. Stolen, about the fact about the money. I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but unfortunately, the decisions do come down to money, right? At the end of the day, all decisions anywhere come down to money. I have a life insurance on my policy. Hopefully nothing happens to me someday, but if it does, I buy as much insurance as I can afford. I would love a $5 million policy. I can't afford it. So we have to look at what's the most efficient use or deployment of our resources, and I know the administration has worked hard on this case. I know they're taking it very seriously. They're not taking it lightly, but it's just not our city. It's not just the city of Bethlehem, but all cities inside the state and inside this country, and the country itself, at the federal level. We're looking at cuts and decisions that are, we find ourselves in uncharted water. Things that were previously considered untouchable or unfathomable now have to be looked at very seriously. And we can afford what we can afford, we can carry what we can carry, and we have to look to make the city meet